I never thought my 66th birthday would be the day my entire world changed. The living room was filled with laughter and the smell of vanilla cake, a tradition I'd started since my kids were little. Candles glowed, glasses clinked. My heart was so full, I thought it might burst. I glanced at my husband, Mark, who'd always been the stoic one, and smiled, thinking how lucky I was to have him by my side all these years. Then he reached into his pocket. I thought it was a card, maybe a small gift. Instead, he pulled out a crisp manila envelope and set it in front of me. "Happy birthday, Margaret," he said, his voice flat. "It's time you saw this." I opened it, expecting a surprise, but inside were divorce papers. Cold, clinical, final. The room spun. My hands trembled. The laughter around me felt like a cruel joke. My children stared. The candles flickered. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The woman who had always smiled politely, who had always put everyone else first, was gone. I looked at Mark, my husband of 40 years, and I knew exactly what gift I'd be giving him in return. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, hit that like button, share where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive in. My name is Margaret Adams. I'm 66, a retired teacher who spent my life nurturing young minds and my family. Known for my quiet strength and unwavering loyalty, I always put others first. Until now, because today, I learned that sometimes strength means putting yourself first, even when it hurts. It's funny how you spend decades building a life together, thinking every little compromise is a brick in the foundation of something unshakable. That's how I felt with Robert, my husband of 38 years. We'd met when I was a substitute teacher in a small-town school where he was the new math instructor. He had a quick wit, a charming smile, and a way of making even my worst days seem bearable. I fell in love fast and hard, the kind of love that blinds you to every red flag. When we got married, I gave up my plans to pursue a master's degree so he could chase his dream of opening a tutoring center. We moved to a smaller house in Florida so he could have space for his office. I taught part-time, took care of the house, and later, our son, Ethan. I clipped coupons, cooked meals, and made sure every birthday and anniversary was special. Robert worked hard too, but the tutoring center was always his. His dream, his name on the door. After Ethan left for college, I tried to revive my own dreams. I signed up for painting classes at the local community center, even taught a couple of after-school programs. But Robert never took it seriously. He'd laugh and say, "Margaret, you're just too nice to say no to anything," and then he'd ask me to run his errands or proofread his flyers. I didn't mind most days. I liked feeling needed. I told myself that's what marriage is. Sacrifice. In the past few years, though, something shifted. Robert started working late more often. He'd leave his phone face down on the table. I'd ask about his day, and he'd just grunt. Busy. Or fine. I'd tell myself not to pry, not to rock the boat. After all, he was the provider, the one who'd supported us all these years. And Ethan was so busy with his own family, I didn't want to burden him with my worries. Then came my 66th birthday. Ethan had offered to host a small dinner party at our house. A handful of close friends, a cake from my favorite bakery, and maybe a round of my favorite board game. I'd always loved birthdays, no matter how simple. They felt like little milestones, a reminder that someone was glad I was here. I had high hopes for that night. Maybe Robert would finally look me in the eye the way he used to. Maybe he'd smile and say, "Margaret, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." I even wore the dress he'd bought me on our anniversary 2 years ago. It still had the tag on it. He'd always promised we'd go somewhere nice so I could wear it. Little did I know that promise had expired, just like so many others. That night would be the last time I'd ever let him make me feel small. Because he didn't bring a gift that night. He brought a sentence, wrapped in legal paper. And he handed it to me like it was the party favor I'd been waiting for. It was supposed to be the kind of night you take a picture of and frame. A small, cozy birthday dinner in the living room, surrounded by Ethan, his wife, a couple of neighbors, and Robert. The room glowed with soft yellow light from the string lights Ethan's wife had hung around the windows. A homemade cake, chocolate with buttercream, my favorite, sat on the table next to a stack of paper plates. I could smell it from the kitchen, warm and comforting. We'd just finished singing Happy Birthday, and Ethan was handing me a small, carefully wrapped box, something from the local craft fair, I imagined. I was already smiling, touched by the thoughtfulness. But before I could even begin to open it, Robert cleared his throat. "Margaret," he said, his voice strangely formal, almost rehearsed. I looked up, still smiling. "I have something for you too." He reached into his jacket pocket. My stomach fluttered with that old familiar mix of hope and anxiety, and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. No bow, no card, just paper. I blinked, confused. "What's this?" I asked, trying to sound light, though my voice cracked a little. He didn't meet my eyes. "Just read it." He placed it in my hand and took a step back, as if I'd burn him if I got too close. I glanced around the room. Ethan's wife had frozen mid-laugh, her mouth still half open. Our neighbor, Jerry, was reaching for his cup of coffee, his eyes darting between us. Even Ethan, who'd never been good at hiding his feelings, looked like he was about to be sick. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, the paper crinkling like dry leaves. Divorce papers, neatly printed, with my name at the top and his signature at the bottom. A polite, clinical betrayal wrapped in legalese. My ears rang, the room blurred. I could hear the blood rush in my head, drowning out the chatter and the laughter. All I could focus on was the name, my name, next to his, now lined up like adversaries on a court docket. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. The words were caught behind a wall of disbelief and heartbreak. I looked up at him, my husband, the man who'd shared my bed, my dreams, my disappointments, and all I saw was a stranger. A stranger who'd chosen this moment, my birthday, to destroy what little dignity I had left. The room seemed to shrink around me. I felt small, like I had been tricked into hosting my own funeral. Ethan moved toward me, his face pale, his hands half raised, but he didn't know what to do. His wife bit her lip, eyes wide with embarrassment or pity. I couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," Robert said, but his tone was empty, a script read by an actor who didn't believe the lines. "It's just not working anymore." Not working, like I was a broken appliance, ready to be thrown away. The words burned, but I stayed silent, too stunned to react. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the guests might hear it. No one moved. No one spoke. I realized then that I was alone in a room full of people, and as I looked at the faces of my family and friends, I knew that no one could put me back together this time. It was my birthday, and I'd just been handed the ultimate gift, freedom, if I was brave enough to take it. That night, after the guests had left, after Ethan's wife had awkwardly stacked the dishes and said her hesitant goodbyes, I sat in the living room staring at the envelope on the coffee table. It was like a silent bomb, ticking, waiting for me to decide what to do next. I replayed every detail of the night in my head. Robert's rehearsed tone, the way he stood back like he expected applause, Ethan's shocked silence, the half-frozen smile on Jerry's face. I could still feel the weight of the envelope in my hand, heavy with finality. Divorce papers, on my birthday. In the dim light, the room felt alien, like it belonged to someone else, a stranger's living room decorated with my memories. I looked around and saw the signs I'd ignored for so long. The unopened mail Robert had started hiding from me. The dinners where he'd eaten quickly and left the table without a word. The weekends he'd spent working late. His phone screen angled away from me. How many times had I let it go, telling myself I was being paranoid? How many times had I convinced myself that love was supposed to fade, that after 40 years of marriage, it was normal for him to drift? But it wasn't normal to hand your wife divorce papers during her birthday party. That wasn't love that had faded. that was love that had rotted. I thought of the years I'd spent supporting him through every job loss, every health scare, every ambition that never quite panned out. I thought of the mortgage I'd refinanced to pay off his debts, the savings I'd dipped into when he wanted to invest in that sure thing that turned into nothing, and all the while, he'd let me believe we were in it together. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf where photos of our life stared back at me. Wedding pictures, Ethan's graduation, family holidays. Each frame felt like a lie now. My hands trembled as I traced the glass, my reflection staring back at me, older and wiser, but still a little shocked. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept seeing the look on Robert's face, calm, almost relieved, as he'd handed me the papers. I remembered how quickly he'd walked away, leaving me to manage the wreckage he'd caused. He'd taken my love, my loyalty, and treated it like a convenience, something to be picked up and put down whenever it suited him. But something shifted in me during those dark hours. I realized that Robert had been undermining me for years. Subtle comments about how I always worried too much, or how I just didn't understand how things worked these days. Each one chipped away at my confidence until I'd started to believe him. But not anymore. I was done being the woman who sat quietly while everyone else made decisions. I was done being the silent partner in my own life. If Robert thought he could just walk out and leave me with nothing but an envelope and a broken heart, he was wrong. I'd fought too long and too hard to build a life, to raise a son, to keep a family together. And now, I was going to fight for myself. I wasn't sure how yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Robert's betrayal define me. Not on my birthday. Not ever again. By the time the sun came up, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to let Robert's betrayal define the rest of my life. I was tired of being the quiet, dependable wife who picked up the pieces and kept the peace. I was going to reclaim my power. After a quick cup of coffee, black, just the way I liked it, I pulled the envelope off the coffee table and tucked it into my purse. I'd spent 40 years building a life with Robert, and I wasn't about to let him tear it all down without a fight. I drove to the lawyer's office, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile as I walked in, and I forced myself to smile back. "I need to speak to someone about a divorce," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering in my chest. An hour later, I was sitting across from a kind-eyed attorney named Linda. She listened intently as I explained everything. The birthday party, the divorce papers, the years of financial support I'd provided. I told her about the savings accounts I'd quietly kept in my name, money Robert never knew about because he'd always dismissed my rainy day funds as unnecessary. Linda nodded thoughtfully. "You've been the one holding things together all along," she said, "and you have every right to protect what's yours." She explained how we could separate the assets, how I could ensure my own financial security. I felt a spark of strength ignite in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Leaving her office, I stopped by the bank to check on those old savings accounts. Seeing the balances, modest but enough to keep me steady, gave me a sense of power I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I wasn't as helpless as Robert had led me to believe. I'd been strong all along, just too loyal to see it. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen, sketching out my plan. Robert thought he'd given me a gift on my birthday, a cruel little package wrapped in legal jargon. But I had a gift of my own, a gift he'd never forget. I planned every detail, from the timing to the legal steps I'd need to take. I thought about all the times he'd taken my kindness for granted, all the moments he'd dismissed my voice. This time, I would be heard. This time, I would stand my ground. Because birthdays aren't just about cake and candles. Sometimes they're about lighting a fire you never knew you had, and I was ready to burn down every lie he'd ever told me. The living room felt too small for the confrontation I'd been building up to. I'd spent days preparing, mentally rehearsing my lines, gathering every document, every receipt, every proof of the sacrifices I'd made for Robert. I even had the lawyer on standby, just in case things got ugly. Robert sat on the sofa, flipping through his phone as if the world hadn't changed. When I entered the room, he didn't even look up. I cleared my throat, and his head jerked up like a deer caught in headlights. "Margaret," he started, his tone dripping with that same condescension I'd grown so used to. "Listen, about the divorce, let's just keep things civil. I don't want any drama." Drama? My laugh was short and sharp, a sound I didn't recognize coming from my own throat. "Drama, Robert? You handed me divorce papers at my own birthday party. You embarrassed me in front of our family, our friends, and now you want to talk about drama?" His jaw tightened. "It was never the right time, Margaret. You wouldn't have understood." "I understand plenty," I said, my voice steady. "I understand how many times I paid your credit card bills when you couldn't. I understand how I dipped into my savings to cover your business fiascos, money I had saved for my own security. I understand that while you played the big man at dinner parties, I was the one balancing the checkbook." Robert's face turned a deep, mottled red. "That's not fair," I cut him off. "What's not fair is you thinking you could break me, that I'd just roll over and accept whatever scraps you decided to toss me?" I pulled the manila folder from my bag and laid it on the coffee table between us. "These are the financial statements. The lawyer has copies. Every transfer, every check I wrote to keep this house afloat, every sacrifice I made for you." He reached for the folder, but I held up a hand. "No, Robert, you don't get to see them. Not until you sign the settlement papers I had drawn up. I'm keeping my share, and you're getting exactly what's left." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Like he was seeing someone he didn't know, someone strong. "And one more thing," I added, my tone dropping to a low, controlled burn. "That birthday party you ruined? It was the best gift you could have given me. It woke me up. It showed me who you really are, and who I need to be." He stared, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Margaret, you don't have to do this. We can talk, work things out." I shook my head slowly. "No, Robert. I gave you every chance to do right by me. You chose betrayal. Now I'm choosing myself." As I turned to leave, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, like I'd shed decades of doubt in a single conversation. Behind me, Robert called my name, but I didn't turn back. He'd made his choice, and I'd made mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, sunlight barely peeking over the horizon. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone else's approval to start my day. The house was silent, except for the comforting tick of the old clock on the living room wall, a gift from my mother on my wedding day. I'd always loved that clock, even when Robert had called it tacky. Now it felt like an old friend. I poured myself a cup of coffee, letting the aroma fill the kitchen like a warm embrace. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to make everyone else comfortable. Robert, the kids, even his friends. I'd let myself become a caretaker for everyone's needs but my own. Somewhere along the line, I'd lost the spark that made me me. Margaret Adams, the woman who loved books, who laughed at bad puns, who could whip up a Thanksgiving dinner that made the neighbors jealous. And now? Now I felt like I'd found her again. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd balanced checkbooks and planned birthday parties. The same one where Robert had once sat with his head in his hands after a failed business deal, and I'd comforted him with kind words and my life savings. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. I thought about the confrontation the night before. The way Robert's face had crumbled when he realized I wasn't the same woman he'd taken for granted. I'd found strength in that moment, strength I didn't know I had. And though it hurt to think about all the years I'd spent propping him up, it felt liberating to know I'd finally chosen myself. I reached for the small journal I'd started keeping after the party, the one where I wrote down every thought and feeling I'd been too scared to say out loud. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "Today, I chose peace. Today, I chose me. Today, I started living life on my own terms." It wasn't poetic, but it was honest, and that's what mattered. The phone rang, and I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet, not even the kids who'd sent me half-hearted messages after the party. I needed time to figure out who I was without the labels of wife, mother, fixer. I needed to learn how to be Margaret again. I made plans to visit a friend next week, a friend I'd lost touch with because Robert hadn't liked her. I called the local community center to ask about volunteering. I even looked up a pottery class at the library. The world felt wide open, like a blank canvas waiting for me to paint something beautiful. And as I stood at the window watching the sunrise spread across the sky, I whispered a promise to myself. No one gets to hand me divorce papers on my birthday and expect me to shrink. No one gets to write the ending of my story but me. I picked up the phone, deleted every call and text from Robert, and blocked his number. Not out of anger, but out of love, for myself. Because the best gift I could give to myself was the freedom to build a life where I wasn't anyone's afterthought. Margaret Adams was finally free, and she wasn't looking back. What would you do if your partner betrayed you on your birthday? Would you fight for them, or would you walk away and choose your own strength and happiness? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than they think. Let's build a community where no one feels alone in their struggles, where every story, yours included, matters. Subscribe for more stories that remind us how powerful we really are.